Hello and welcome back to Essentially Explained. Today, joined by my co-host, Mr. Dan Marks. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm very good. If you don't know already, me and Martin are currently infected with the plague. We're self-isolating, so if you can hear it in my throat, I do apologise. But as always, I'm going to do my best, soldier on, for the good of the community, marginal social benefits and all that. So you guys better be grateful, basically.
Getting those economic terms in quickly.
Yeah, this isn't rational behaviour for me. This makes no sense.
Yeah. But yeah, so today we're going for quite a spicy one in terms of the world of economics. We're talking about austerity and essentially whether it's a good idea or not. I mean, I think we both have rather strong views about austerity.
Yes.
But from a sort of unbiased viewpoint, I guess there are a couple arguments you could make for why austerity could be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, if we just sort of like recap over what austerity is, just in case, I'm sure you guys have learned the basics of it. You might not have heard of the name before, but all austerity is simply really it's a period, if you like, especially likened to 2008, following the global financial crash, where governments rein back their spending or in turn increase their taxes to try and reduce a budget deficit in simple terms. But it's used as a term to, in a more broad sense, indicate sort of like an economic slowdown and the rolling back of state commitment.
Yes, so obviously the most famous example is, or most recent example was in the UK after the financial crisis, which the Conservative government, led by David Cameron and of course the Chancellor at the time, George Osborne, a very popular economic figure. Obviously, in the elections, all they could talk about was reducing the deficit. But one could make an argument that austerity measures are about sort of taking a hit today in order to have a brighter future. Because, I guess you could make the case that overcommitting government spending is not sustainable. Because if you have to keep borrowing and you're in the future, if you're unable to repay that debt, then your economy could suffer as a result. I have a feeling that you don't subscribe to that argument, and you sort of think quite the opposite view to that.
I don't subscribe to that argument. I mean, okay, if we take your point, I guess let's stick to your line of reasoning. I guess, yeah, you're right. There is. In financial crashes and global economic downturns, it is very typical that it will coincide with a government that is spending too much, overcommitting their state finances. Greece is a perfect example of a fiscal meltdown, if you like, of where the Greek government simply were just borrowing on a catastrophic level. I mean, I don't know what their debt to GDP ratio is, but it will be in the hundreds and hundreds of percent. And yeah, it does happen a lot. There is, of course, a limit to how much a state can spend. And if what they're using the money for, they're borrowing, is just for day-to-day financing, then of course, that's an unreasonable and it's almost reckless, really, isn't it? These governments have to be using borrowed money to invest, just like you would if you were taking a loan out. You wouldn't take out a payday loan, for example, for like Wonga. I mean, they're not even around anymore, but when they were, you wouldn't do that to pay for just a month's worth of bills or something. You take out a loan to invest, I don't know, in a business or home improvements. Do you know what I mean? Something that delivers a longer term benefit. But yeah, it is true that in 2008, a lot of governments were simply borrowing too much. And so, austerity was their first port of call. But no, you're right. I don't subscribe to that view. If we go back to the traditional economic theory for a second. Sorry, I'm going to bore you here. As we all know, the basic macro model is, of course, ADAS, all the rest of it, and aggregate demand is made up of a sum of components: consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Now, of course, government spending, therefore, is one way of expanding or, making the economy grow, and it's a vital part of government the economy, both in the UK and other places around the world, but particularly in the UK, where the state has a fairly active role. You know, think of stuff like the NHS, for example, is a big employer of people. You know, employs I think about 70 or 80,000 staff. So it doesn't make sense that in a global economic downturn, when growth is already slowing down or potentially in the negative as it was, you know, I think we're in a triple dip recession around the sort of 2011, 2012 mark, and you know you're reducing spending even further, which of course is in a very pure sense reducing GDP, you know, and making people unemployed. It makes no sense.
Well, you see, I'm going to argue for the other side on this, because government spending is not the be and end all of the economy. As we all know, governments are rather inefficient with their spending, and one could argue that by reducing government spending, you're sort of reducing that crowding out effect, and you're leaving more room for private investors to invest and create new jobs and boost the economy with, you know, giving people incomes which they can then spend on various goods domestically. And of course, although you do point out that the economy did recover rather slowly following the recession, it did recover in the end. Obviously, with Brexit and COVID, maybe that sort of hard work has been undone. But the economy did start to grow, and I think to say that austerity measures was a complete failure would be rather farcical, to be honest. But yes, I don't know what your views on that are. But
okay, so if we take the first, like the crowding out effect, yes, it's true that excessive government borrowing can lead to a crowding out effect. If you don't know what a crowding effect is, Martin May is actually going to give a very, very brief definition.
So essentially the idea is that the crowding out effect is that a government can sort of, as the name suggests, crowd out private enterprise, because if that government is essentially providing all the services and goods, then there's not room in those markets or in the market for private businesses to provide those services and goods, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that the correct definition? Have I got that right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's looking at it refers to a financial markets perspective. You know, we've all heard of, of government bonds. You know, they're essentially bits of debt, if you like, of government debt bought up by someone. The government takes that money and promises to pay them some interest back and the full amount at the end. And they are sold in the same way as shares and treasure and other securities on the financial market. And of course, if the government starts borrowing too much, they have to issue a lot more bonds, borrow a lot more money. So there's a crowding out effect of government bonds in the financial market.
Yes. So, I mean, this is a good point. I mean, just as an aside, I do actually agree that austerity is a terrible idea. I'm not far right leaning conservative. However, I can see the argument from a neoclassical side that reducing government spending can have benefits in theory. In practice, I think you always do need to have the government there, especially in a recession where further reducing your government input is not going to help. It could sort of aggravate that situation, and that's probably why the recovery took so long. It's because obviously you had people being laid off, and the number of policemen and the investment in the NHS sort of dried up and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go to sort of like something you mentioned earlier was the get the deficit down was the Conservative campaign slogan, particularly between the sort of 2010 and 2015 elections. It was the big sort of like talking point. The Conservative government at the time actually, essentially, if you watch any of the debates, we'll actually link a few in the description actually, they essentially blamed the financial crash on Labour's borrowing, which we all admit was reckless and too far excessive. We all agree on that. It was ridiculous. But that wasn't the root cause of a financial crash. Actually, a lot of that spending was as a result of the downturn caused by the credit crunch. Gordon Brown at the time, who was Prime Minister and previously Chancellor, he reduced VAT rates, a lot of investment in terms of infrastructure, and also the welfare system, which is designed to increase disposable income and drive up consumption, which is exactly what you need to counter an economic downturn. And, you know, on the point of, I think you referred to, was it the recovery was much slower than expected, and that's a good point, because the Conservatives at the time, once they'd got the budget deficit down to about half of what it was, I think it was about sort of 50 to 60 billion in the sort of Theresa May 2016-17 era, down from like 130 before it was stupid. They actually, they said that they had, you know, they were there by economic plan, a long-term economic plan was the reason why they had got the economy to in the shape it was before the financial crash. But actually, you know, we even just consult traditional economic theory, which we all know isn't very good at explaining things in the real world, but here it does. The UK was operating below its YFE, its full output. It had a negative output gap at the time of the financial crash. You know, it lost a lot of its GDP. So, of course, it was always going to make that back up. That wasn't a result of the austerity measures the Conservatives undertook. That was simply because the economy wasn't acting at full employment when the financial crash hit. So that growth was always going to come back.
Yeah, no, you make an excellent point there, that, you know, it would have come back to the sort of natural rate after sort of the initial shock. I'm just going to sort of throw a bit of a curveball in there. It does seem we're sort of battering austerity measures at the moment.
Well,
and low government spending. Yeah. But could you make an argument that by reducing government spending today, and by allowing those businesses to sort of take up that space in markets that the government was previously occupying, that you're actually helping the economy in the long run? In the short run, obviously, your growth might be hit because you're obviously reducing your government spending. But in the long run, you'll have those businesses there that don't have that short, well, arguably, obviously, businesses are for profits, which are arguably a short-term view, but they don't have such a short-term view as governments, which obviously have a limited time in office and therefore are rather inefficient, and, well, more inefficient than businesses would be, and therefore you're making the economy more efficient by having businesses run those services rather than the government, per se.
How many questions was that? It was just one very long one.
Yeah.
No, I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, no, you are right. In summary, what he was basically saying is that private firms are much more efficient. X inefficiency? Yes, it is something generated particularly by monopolistic firms and government-run firms, which tend to operate monopolies anyway, because they don't have that incentive to make a profit, so they often run at a loss and are inefficient. British Airways is a perfect example of a state-run business that was making huge amounts of losses, and so went to the private sector, was taken over by private ownership, sold off to the private sector, and now it's, you know, a very successful company. And so yes, you are right, private businesses are generally more efficient from a profit sense anyway, generating profit, expanding than a publicly owned one. That's true. But I don't know, I take issue with the fact, the sort of the hijacking of the crisis by the Tories. I mean, I don't know, I know austerity is an economic point, but it's rooted in politics, isn't it? Of course. You know, I mean, we're talking about people's livelihoods here. It's not just a purely economic viewpoint, it's a moral viewpoint as well. You know, the austerity measures that the Tories undertook, such as the 1% cap on all public sector jobs, pretty much, the junior doctor, the new contracts, as they put them, that, you know, caused the junior doctors to go on a massive strike. You had the move to universal credit away from job seekers and the previous regime for welfare benefits. And yes, these are all just, in principle, what they made them look like they were fancy new government policies, you know, dressed up in new ideas and new names. But at the core, it was just a policy designed to, you know, as one satirical program put it, snippy snip. You know, you snip away public finances, trying to cut bills here and there. And yeah, austerity measures, you need to make difficult decisions, but that shouldn't come at the cost of people's livelihoods. Doesn't make sense economically because you're reducing household income in a consumer-based economy like the UK. That puts a strain on demand and that contracts your economy, but also because the government has to act in the interests not just of the economy but its people as well. And they failed to do that. They were reckless. They really were. It makes no sense.
That's a fair point. I mean, thinking just beyond income, you talk about people's livelihoods. Obviously, if you're investing less in, or not making the necessary investment in education and healthcare and various services, then the quality of life of people will be reduced, not just their incomes. And of course, like the goal of a government really should be ensuring that the people have the best quality of life on average, rather than taking, I guess, a more selfish view. Although one could argue that perhaps they had the best interests of the economy and the country at hand.
I think they're the best interests of the next election.
Yeah, but yes, as we said, it's rather flawed. As you always say, the economy is not like a household. You will run a deficit. If you're not running a deficit, then A, it's incredibly rare, and B, probably not a particularly effective method of running an economy. But yes, I think for today that concludes our talk about austerity, unless you've got any final thoughts.
No, I mean, it's a bit of a shorter video today. We realise that some of them have overrun a little bit. I know everyone's busy in today's world. It's not realistic to listen to a 40-something minute podcast, and I think actually sometimes,
especially when I'm talking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. When you're talking, or even me, actually. But yeah, hopefully this new format is more ideal for you. Let us know if you've got any thoughts. What our aim with these is firstly, we enjoy it. We enjoy the discussion because although me and Martin tend to agree on most things economically and politically, it's nice for one of us to play devil's advocate at times. And hopefully it's interesting for you guys to listen to, but maybe also for students out there studying A-level, university or whatever. This provides a good essay plan because austerity is something that will come up. I mean, you might not get a question just like, was the Conservative austerity program necessary? Did it harm the economy, whatever? You might not have got a question exactly like that, but maybe it will tie into something like fiscal policy, or something like financial markets, or the crowding out effect, or politically motivated choices in economics. So there's lots of applications with these, and hopefully these videos benefit that. So I think we'll wrap it up there, and we're going to, I think we mentioned a lot of concepts today. Actually, we might possibly do a couple little short videos explaining them just in pure detail. Maybe might be a good idea.
Yeah, we'll do some explanation videos on a couple of things we covered, and hopefully the shorter videos do provide some decent information. We're constantly trying to find ways to improve them, but it will take a bit of time. We're quite new to this sort of whole YouTube thing. But yes, until next time, guys. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.